So what we're here talking about a lot here at COP20 is talking about Quebec's cap and trade system, which was put in place in 2013, and we've already had four very successful local auctions. But the big news is that starting in 2014, we linked our cap and trade system to California's, creating the largest carbon market in North America. And you're seeing two subnational states, Quebec and California, from two different countries coming together and actually creating a very successful carbon market. We had our first carbon emission credit auction last November 25th, and not only did we sell out all the credits available for 2014 and 2017 during this auction, but they sold above the actual floor price, which shows us that businesses not only trust the system, but understand that this system is here to stay. So that's a very exciting component of our climate action plan that we've put in place in Quebec. And the revenues from this cap and trade system will be estimated at about $2.8 billion from now until 2020. And we will invest this in Quebec's Green Fund, which will be dedicated to helping businesses in Quebec transition out of a carbon-based economy. And we'll be investing all of the monies in different initiatives like clean tech, electrification of transportation, public transit rather, and also scientific research, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. So we're doing a lot already to advance the cause of climate change, but we're working with partners. Through our involvement, we're co-chairing, Quebec is co-chairing the climate group's initiatives regarding climate change, and we're working with other jurisdictions from Europe, from Africa, and also North America, especially the Canadian provinces. We're working with our friends in Ontario, with our friends in British Columbia, and of course California and other states like Oregon to further develop the issue of carbon pricing and really being at the forefront of developing this and making sure that we're taking concrete steps in the fight against climate change.
So how do you see that subnational governments are being included or taking more into account in this new negotiation process in the ADP? Do you see this taking more importance moving forward for the 2015 agreement?
I think so. I think in the latest versions I've seen of the ADP, you're clearly seeing a major role for the subnationals. And when we talk about subnationals, we're talking about the regions, the cities, and the states and provinces. We're a signatory of the Compact of States and Regions that was put forth by the Climate Group. We signed it yesterday. And I think there's a real energy. And we started feeling this in New York back in September. And here in Lima, it's clear that we're seeing a major role for the subnationals. And we're seeing, even after Lima, heading towards Paris, we're seeing that there's going to be a lot of events, both in Canada, in the US, in Europe, and Africa, that will continue the momentum established here for the subnationals and making sure that the voice of the subnationals, because you have to remember, we are the governments that are closest to the people, and what we're doing is not just talking. We're actually putting in place real mechanisms. I was talking to you about the cap and trade system, but other jurisdictions all over the world are doing concrete steps adapted to their own realities. And I think to make sure that there's real progress heading into Paris, the subnationals will have to be integrated and clearly involved in the process.
So why do you think, clearly Quebec's case is very unique and they're taking a lot of different initiatives, so why do you think, particularly for Quebec, this has been possible, and why has there been such a push for more ambitious climate actions?
Well, I think Quebec has had some tremendous leadership from our Premier Couillard, and our former Premier Charest, who were at the forefront of establishing a climate action strategy for Quebec. And so starting in 2006, we set up our first climate change action plan. Through 2012, we were able to reduce our emissions by 6.8%, and our goal was 6% compared to 1990 levels. And now our 2013-2020 plan is aiming for 20% reductions versus 1990 levels. And so we have to take action. And I think there's a reality that everybody, both at all the levels really, is a reality that's being recognized. And as Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, we don't have any plan B because there's no planet B, and we have to deal with this now. There's a real sense of urgency. And Quebec has acted with real concrete actions, and we're continuing this development. As I said, we're moving forward with California, but we're also developing partnerships with Ontario. We're developing partnerships with British Columbia. We're working with other U.S. states that all recognize the urgency of acting, because if we don't act now, we simply won't be able to leave any real planet for our children. So we have to act now. And I think what we've seen this week here at COP20 is that a lot of other subnationals feel the same way. And what we're doing is pooling our knowledge and our experiences together. And so depending on each experience, we're seeing best practices emerge, depending on everybody's reality. But when you see everybody coming together, you see that there's a real movement representing hundreds of millions of people that want real action now and have to be listened to.
And do you see this subnational governments pushing, especially in Canada, which is your specialty? So have you seen a push for the federal government to take more ambitious climate action? Have you seen any of that here at the COP20? I
have. I mean, we've like, for example, the Compact of States of Regions, which was signed yesterday, was signed by Quebec, was signed by Ontario, was signed by British Columbia, and was signed by Manitoba. So what you're seeing there is 70% of Canada signed the States and Regions Compact, which calls for immediate action regarding climate change, regarding targets for Paris. So there's definitely a movement in Canada requesting immediate action regarding climate change, and it's a majority of Canadians, of Canadian provinces, representing 70% of the population that are saying clearly we need to act now. And so that movement, I think, is spurring along a mentality of change and cannot be ignored by the national government. And it's really important now to face the fact that there needs to be carbon pricing, that there needs to be real measures put forth for Paris. And what you're looking at is the provincial governments and the territorial governments in Canada coming together and saying we need to act now. And not only are we talking about it, we have real actions. BC has a carbon tax, Quebec has a cap and trade system, even Alberta has a certain form of carbon pricing. Ontario signed a MOU with Quebec on November 21st saying that it was willing to harmonize with Quebec on the question of carbon pricing. So you're seeing this real movement. And also in April, there will be, for the first time in Canada, a summit of all the Canadian premiers and from the provinces and the territories coming to Quebec City, led by Premier Couillard of Quebec, to sit down and discuss the issues of climate change and carbon pricing with regards to the next Canadian energy strategy. So there's really a lot of movement at the provincial and territorial level towards real action, and that's a good example to see how the subnationals can work together to affect real change.
And how do you think we can educate more people to generate this change from the bottom up?
I think communications is key. I think we need, as much as, yes, side events and COPs and a lot of meetings and discussions, I think a real important component of all this is to make sure that there's a lot of communications and there's a lot also of shared information. And for example, we're involved very much with the Climate Group and other organizations like the Climate Group, which bring together all these subnational governments. We were talking earlier this morning to Sao Paulo, the Basque Country, KwaZulu-Natal of South Africa, and sharing this experience, coming together and making sure that we understand that we are not alone, we're not isolated, but quite the contrary. When you put everybody together, you understand that there's a lot of energy behind this But what we need to do is talk about it more, communicate more efficiently, and share the information, share the best practices, and find also what's the common thread between all of us. Make sure that we understand that maybe we're acting differently, and of course, our reality is much different than that of KwaZulu-Natal, for example. There is differentiated responsibility, but at the base of all this, we have the same objective, and there's a lot more that unites us than we think. And so, by uniting our experiences and showing the real numbers that are claiming, that are more than claiming, that are saying we want action now, I think we can realize that we have actually much more pressure to bear on this than we think.
And do you think civil society is playing an increasing role in pushing subnational action? And how can we achieve more action from civil society?
Absolutely. Civil society has a very important role. I mean, for example, take the example of Quebec. Civil society has been at the forefront of demanding real change, and we're seeing it across Canada as well. So I think civil society, again, there has to be partnerships. I think we have to work constructively together. And again, finding what unites us and making sure that at the national level and international level, we're heard. And what we're seeing is that there's a real will to accept those messages. So civil society is definitely part of the equation for success.